This is pretty much the worst video ever made.
Yeah, for sure. That's funny stuff. Hey, bullying sucks. My story started when I was little, really, to be honest with you, 4 or 5 years old. It started probably most significantly with my dad investing a simple truth in me that was so very important, and it's probably one that many of the guys in this room have had instilled in them, and I hope so. I hope this is the case. But my dad instilled in me over and over and over and over again, you never hit a girl, never hit a girl, never hit a girl. I think it was mainly because I had a little sister. Never hit a girl. I heard it over again. Can I get an amen? I mean, that's a good thing to teach a boy, right? I better hear a lot of deep voices, amen, or somebody's getting their butt whooped. But you never, ever hit a girl. And that's the case. And then one day I found myself at 12 years old, 13 years old, 7th grade, early in the year, on a school bus, and minding my own business. I wasn't the most popular kid. I wasn't the stature of physical specimen that I am today. I was like 75 or 80 pounds, squirrely, little tiny kid, just as skinny and dorky looking as you could possibly imagine. I think that my ears were the same size they are now. So on this tiny little head, and it's just a huge mess of awkward junior hire. And then this girl, Shawnee Zimmerman, came up and started picking on me, started saying stuff to me, started messing with me, and I'm like, I could just feel I'm just trying to ignore her, trying to mind my own business, stay away, and then it happens. She hauls back and starts punching me over and over and over again. And the only thing I can hear other than the sound of her fist smashing against my face is my dad saying, never hit a girl. I'm like, do you get to ask for ID to make sure? There's just a part of me that's going, are we positive this is a girl? Do the rules apply still? She's hits like a boy, I'm telling you. And so I'm getting my head beat in literally on the front end of this bus. I don't know what the crap the bus driver's doing, right? I'm like, what are you thinking, man? And I'm getting hammered to death. And man, nothing will give you a reputation faster than getting beat up by a girl on a school bus. By the next day, it was on like crazy, and it was a terrible story that just kept going and going and going. And when once a girl beats you up on a school bus, everybody's like, oh man, I got this all day. And so they just stood in line, sometimes literally, to beat me up. Like it was one person after another, constantly being bullied by people. I know that it doesn't put me in the strongest of terms. Some of you are like, he got beat up by a girl. Can I make fun of it, or is it too soon? Yes, it's fine, whatever. Anyways, but the point of it is, what I say is to say the bullying got worse, and the story keeps going, and God had an unbelievable plan. But here's the deal. All of us experience the bully. We asked our junior high to not have junior high class. Normally, our junior hires come in here and they hang out for worship and the band, and then after communion, they go on and they do a class that's a little more relevant to them. But when we're talking about bullying sucks, nothing could be more relevant to a junior high audience. So we said, hey, we want you to stick around. We want you to be a part of what's going on, because we're going to speak to some things that you deal with every single day. Whether you get bullied because whatever reason, right? I mean, it might be you're too tall, you're too skinny, you're too fat, your hair looks this way, you wear these things, you got that, you got braces like everybody else, you got whatever it is, right? There's something that people leverage and they want to bully you about it. And but the thing is, we're not just talking to junior high students or high school students. We're talking to us, because as much as it happened maybe when we were on a playground or in a hallway when we were kids, it still happens today. The bullies don't always grow up and grow out of that, right? They sometimes still bully us in meetings, or they bully, domineer conversation, or they talk down to us, or they treat us in a way that just puts us in a place where we're like, man, I just feel overwhelmed, overpowered, controlled by that person in my life. You might be experiencing a bully in your life in today. You might be experiencing it in terms of a relationship that you're like, man, I just feel like this relationship just seems to be rolling over me all the time. It just seems to bring me down, push me down, make me feel small. All this stuff that just keeps rolling over me. You know why you feel bullied? Because we have a common enemy. And the truth is, sometimes it shows up next to the bike rack in a playground when you're in the 3rd grade. Sometimes he shows up in the hallway when you're in 7th grade, or in the form of a girl on a bus. And when I was in the 7th grade, or he shows up in a meeting when we're adults, or in a marriage, or in some sort of hopeless situation. We're all tired of being bullied by life. And bullying sucks. It's terrible to experience. So what we want to talk about is, what does it mean to be bullied? What do we understand about this guy, this people? Now for today, I'll largely use the illustration of the bully, the idea of it happening in a playground or on a bus or in a schoolyard or that kind of stuff, but apply it to whatever it is. It's not just about that kid or those people that beat you up or domineer a conversation. Apply it to your story and your life. And we're going to look at one that doesn't look like bullying on the surface, but I promise you it is. It's a story that all of us are pretty familiar with. It's the story of David and Goliath, the best story of bullying I could possibly imagine, to be totally honest. Having been through it, I'm a connoisseur of bullying, or being bullied at least, and I know bullying when I see it. And man, this is a story. Now, you're familiar probably with the story of David and Goliath, even if church isn't your deal, you know. You come into church and you're like, oh, I know that one, right? There's this kid, this little guy, he beats the big guy. It's kind of the upset of the year. It's a big deal. It happens every March. I'm sorry. There's something that happens that it goes on, and he, 5 stones, and he, throws the stuff, and it's a great, great story. You know the story. It's a little bit familiar to you, but I want to set it up for us. There's the Israelite army, and there's the Philistine army, right? You got the Philistine army comes from their kingdom, Israelite comes from their kingdom, and they wind up on the top of 2 mountains. And let's not call them mountains, because it's not like mountainous, but they're big areas, enough to support all these people kind of living up on them in hopes or in waiting for this battle that was going to happen in the valley between. And that's where the bullying takes place. The bullying always takes place in the valley. And so the Philistines, they kind of have this big deal guy, right? You know this guy's name, Goliath. He's 9 foot something tall. He's a gigantic dude. Her name is Shawnee. And he comes down into the valley and he dares the Israelite army. I'm not going to lie, but she probably looked a little like it. Bryce told me I should stop using people's first and last name when I talk about them in the day of Facebook. So you can look up Shawnee Zimmerman if you want. But so Goliath, like this champion of Philistines, I mean, he comes out every day and he dares them to do this whole thing. And it's a pretty powerful story. He comes out from the thing of their camp, and he comes down. He's over 9 feet tall, it says. And it says this about what he wore. He wore a bronze helmet in verse 5, a bronze coat of mail, not like fan mail, just like a bunch of chain armor, right? And he wears this stuff over. He has over 125 pounds. He also wore a bronze leg armor and carried a bronze javelin on his shoulder. The shaft of his spear was heavy and thick as a weaver's beam, tipped with an iron spearhead that weighed 15 pounds. Now listen, every sport I play in life, which is not many, right? I picked golf because of all the major sports. It's the most like doing nothing, okay? So I picked golf, like when I play golf or when I go bowling, it's the same exact, I have the same philosophy, right? Blunt force trauma, okay? So when I bowl, I pick the 15 or the 16 pound ball, and because it has gigantic finger holes, and I just pick it and I throw it as hard as I possibly can until my arm gives out somewhere in the 7th or 8th frame. And then I'm like, ow, for like 3 days, right? That's how I play golf. That's how I bowl. It's everything, right? So think about this thing. It has a 15-pound steel tip on it, like the arrowhead or the spearhead on it weighs. This dude is enormous, 125 pounds worth of this, and they got leg stuff and all this stuff. I mean, he's huge. He's over 9 feet tall. To be honest with you, he could have come out in his birthday suit and been like, just sit down on a stool and been like, what y'all got? Like, he's just a huge, gigantic human being, right? And he could have said anything he wanted and just been intimidated, but he's dressed up like compensating for all of what's going on in his head. We're not going to make all the assumption, but he's just got it on in intimidation. And then he declares to the whole deal, like all this stuff. But understand something, he could have walked out there and just been in nothing and been intimidating like crazy. But here's the thing we know about the bully. Whether it's a person or a circumstance or a relationship, the bully always tries to make you feel small. The bully always tries to make you feel small. He might have bullied you in some sort of like really nonsense place. Like it could have been something like they just picking on kids in a playground or in a hallway or wherever it is. But the bully always tries to make you feel less than. That's why he comes out. He comes out all dressed up and get this big old thing. He doesn't need any of that stuff. He's like Andre the Giant. Remember Andre the Giant? Not known as the most toned person ever, right? I mean, he was in shape if round is a shape. And it is a shape. I'm working on people. You guys are not being fair to round, okay? Because I'm going to get in shape. I'm like, nope, round is a shape. What are you trying to get, a triangle? I don't understand. But like Andre the Giant come out and you could hit him all day long. Do you remember Andre the Giant? I'm the only one here. Okay, raise your hand. Okay, you remember? Like he come out, hit, thump, and just knock people over, right? The best part was when he would step into the ring and just step over the ropes, and be this enormous person. He didn't need to wear all the armor. He just wore the, whatever you call those, where do you even buy those wrestling pants? I don't even know. But he wore the wrestling pants. He jumped over the thing. People beat him up. He slammed them in the head, and then he just is done, right? Until Hulk Hogan, but that was a whole nother issue. But anyways, but the deal is that he didn't need all that stuff. He just tried to make people feel small. They would be like, man, he could throw me. He could do this to me. He could do that to me. And that's exactly how the bully always tries to make you feel intimidated by where you're at, making you feel small and insignificant and useless. The truth of the matter is that's always the bully's game, because the bully really isn't that guy. The bully's what's behind that guy. The bully's the enemy that's tweaking those things that makes him feel like he's got to be somebody and he's got to impose that on you. We all face the same enemy. And that's why the bully's story hasn't changed in 4,000 years. Because it's been over and over the same story. And so the story keeps going a little bit longer. Let's put this next verse up and we're going to just kind of work. I can't read this all to you because it just would get confusing. But in verse 8, which happens to be the next verse, it says, Goliath stood and shouted a taunt across the Israelites. Why are you coming out to fight? Why are you all coming out to fight? He said, I'm the Philistine champion, but you are only a few servants of Saul. Choose one man to come down here and fight me. So what happens is they're like, okay, they're going to send one guy, we'll send a bunch of guys, it'll be even, And they're like, no, listen, we'll do like a one-on-one thing. And he just dares them. He says, choose one of you, man, to come down here and fight me. If he kills me, then we'll be your slaves. But if I kill him, then you will be our slaves. I defy the armies of Israel today. Send me the man who will fight me. When Saul and the Israelites heard this, they were terrified and deeply shaken. No kidding, right? He's like, man, he's got it on. And here's the thing that the bully tries to do. He tries to overshadow. Tell me if this isn't the truth in your case, right? The bully tries to overshadow you and make you feel small, and then he tries to define the terms. He sets up the game that happens. You guys are going to play in this game. This is how it's going to work, right? He doesn't say, okay, let's your army fight and my army fight. He comes in, makes them feel small, and then says, well, if you're a real man, you'll send somebody out here to fight me on my terms, one-on-one. Well, man, nobody's going for that. Nobody in this whole passage goes, no, that's not the way this war thing works, right? We all get out the weapons, you all get out the weapons, we storm into the valley and kick everybody's butt. There's some dead on this side, there's some dead on that side, and the winner is the guy with the most alive, right? That's how this thing works. We don't negotiate a one-on-one battle. But here's what the bully does. He comes down there and makes himself look big, makes you look small, and dares you to play life on his terms. The bully not only wants to make you feel small, but he wants to make you feel like he's in control and tell you how to play the game, how life is supposed to live, how it's going to be if you're going to exist in his world. And he tries to make you fit into his story instead of understanding that your story and his story are the same. That's the thing that we have to understand, is that the bully always tries to make us play his game. And it happens over and over again in our lives. See, the bully tries to tell us that what we see when we look in the mirror isn't what should be there. You should be bigger or smaller or taller or shorter or prettier or this or that. And he tries to switch the game up, right? He tries to switch the rules of the game so that he's the winner and you're the loser. It happens every day. The bully in our minds, the enemy, tells us we should be this. And when we look in the mirror, we see things that aren't that. I want to be thinner, shames us, condemns us, and we feel worthless, we feel weak, we feel small, and we feel like we'll never win this whole fight with him. It's because he makes us feel small, and then he defines the rules. And it's a mess. And here's the thing that's not going on behind, that you don't read in this passage, but it's in the greater story here, is how Saul got in control. Saul's the king of Israel, and he came to Israel in a specific time in the story when they were going, man, we want a king like all the other kingdoms have kings. So all the other kingdoms in the area, they all have a head of, the whole deal, and they have a king and all this pomp and circumstance. And they're like, we want a king like they have a king. And God's like, no, I want to be your king. Let me be your king, and you just don't worry. Don't be like them. Just let me be your king. Let me be king over Israel. Let's be unique in this. And they finally pushed back enough, and God says, fine, you can have a king. And so they literally, look in Scripture, they literally looked around and like, who are going to get to be king? Hey, Saul is taller than everybody else. Literally head and shoulders, it says, above everyone else. So they pick Saul because he's a big dude. They're like, he's big. He can be our king. Okay, so understand what's going on in this story. You got to read just a little beneath the surface here to understand. Goliath walks down into the valley and says, hey, send out one guy to talk to me. Come out here and fight me, and we'll fight, and whoever wins will be the winner. How do you think he'd get away with that? He wasn't talking to Joe on the line or Jim back there in the back. He wasn't talking to some guy over here. He's not talking. Listen, I'm not being prejudiced, but like the reality is, the Israelite people, not known to be a real tall people. Am I getting it? So like the truth is, not a naturally tall group of people. You got this one guy who's literally head and shoulders taller. Have you ever been in an elementary classroom as an adult and you're walking around, you're like, I feel like a giant, This is how Saul felt. He's head and shoulders taller than everyone else. Goliath comes out and goes, hey, send down somebody to fight me, and we're going to fight to the death, and whoever wins, then we'll be slaves of the other, right? Like, everybody in the whole army is going, what are you doing, Saul? You going to go? Can you imagine being Saul? Like he's daring somebody to fight. They're not looking at the stocky guy over here. They're going, everybody's looking at Saul, and Saul's going, I don't know, don't look at him in the eye. Like he's trying to avoid it. And isn't this what the bully always does? Tries to play the game by his rules and tries to leverage your insecurities. The bully, our enemy, always goes after those same buttons, makes you feel small, leverages your insecurities, and tries to play the game by his rules. When none of those things are true, you're not small. You're significant, not in the same way he wants to, but he wants to shift the rules so that you feel small and insignificant and like you don't have what it takes. He sends that exact same message over and over and over again, and then he chooses to kind of try to redefine the rules to make you lose at a game that he's playing that no one else wants to play. And then finally he changes it and it leverages your insecurities to get you to play. And that's exactly what he's doing. He's pushing at Saul. He's talking to the armies of Israel, but he's really looking right at Saul. And man, Saul is desperate. He'll do anything because Saul, just because he's head and shoulders taller than everybody else, does not mean that Saul's got it all together. Saul leads with his insecurities all the time, right? And this is this huge story that's playing out. Now, while this story is playing out on the battlefield, there's another story at home with Jesse and David. Now, you wonder where David's going to come in. He's not just one of the guys who goes, hey, I'll do it. He's at home because he's too young to be on the battlefield. He's a kid. And his dad sends him down to the battlefield, and the Bible says that he takes some grain and some stuff and some cheeses. And so basically, got to get what he's going on here. Like, he's like, hey, I made some grilled cheese sandwiches. Take them down to your brothers. Read it, it's in the Bible. Take them down to your brothers. They're fighting. So, David's already sent in. He's a little twerpy kid. He goes in. He's got the cheese sandwiches, and he's looking around for his big brothers. And he gets over there, and he's like, what's going on? Why is everybody standing up here? And he's like, oh, this guy, Goliath, keeps coming out, and he keeps daring us, and he keeps standing out there, and he's huge, and everybody's scared, and we don't know what to do. And David's like, what? What are you talking about? He's talking back and forth with all these people. Now, David's going to stand up. You know the story, so I'm not like telling you how this thing ends. David's going to stand up to Goliath, and spoiler alert, he wins, okay? So he's got the cheese sandwiches, and he starts like, who does this guy think he is? He hasn't seen Goliath. And he hasn't gotten it, but they're like, man, he's a giant. He's enormous. And David's hasn't seen Goliath, but he knows what a giant looks like. He's got that idea, and he understands that he's a kid. He doesn't see the size difference as something significant in his mind. He's got these cheese sandwiches talking back and forth, and his brother overhears the conversation. Now look at this verse. I can't remember what verse it is. Let's put it up there. 28. So in 28, it says, when David's oldest brother, Eliab, heard David talking to the men, he was angry. Okay. Big brothers don't like it when little brothers say they'll do something that the big brother won't do. Get what happens. He says, what are you doing here anyways, he demanded. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? Like, you see the condescending sound of that, right? The big brother hears the little brother saying, I'll fight him. Where's he at? Where is he at? Let me at him. Let me at him. What was that? It's in my head. All right, so I have these conversations that go on behind the scenes a lot of times. Sometimes they come out for a second, and then we got to put them back in there. But here's this boy who's hearing this young man who hears his little brother talking about going down there. He's like, you hear the condescending tone? That's where we're at. He comes up to him and he says, where are those little sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? Where's your little lamb, David? Aren't you supposed to be tending to some sheep somewhere back at that? Give me my cheese sandwiches and you go back to where you're supposed to be. He said, you're not supposed to even be up here. He says, what are you even doing up here? This doesn't even make sense, he demanded. What about those few sheep you're supposed to be doing? I know about your pride and your deceit. You just want to see the battle. You're just up here because you want to see me get beat. Here's the thing you have to understand. The battle, the bullied, they're not always the obvious ones. It's not always the big kid. It's not all of them look like Scott Farkas. He had yellow eyes, I swear, right? Not all of them look like that kid who has red hair and yellow eyes, and not that red-haired kid. If you have yellow eyes, I'm very sorry. Go see a doctor because I think that's jaundice. But yeah, but the thing is that you've got this huge problem that you can kind of identify these kids that kind of have a chip on their shoulder and they're picking on people, but it's not always that way, right? Sometimes the bullies aren't like that. Sometimes the bullies are the ones who are going, I got a 99 on that test. What'd you get? Oh, you got a 92. Or it's this kind of this subtle bullying that we kind of talk about, or a person who shames us because of the way we look. Says, oh, you're not worth this, or you're not valuable because of that, or you're less than because of the way you are. That kind of stuff isn't always people beating you up and yelling and screaming. Sometimes it's just the way they look down their nose at you. And the truth is that bullies don't always look like bullies. Sometimes they look like your big brother. Or sometimes they look like the people that we see all the time, that we have conversations with. The story sets up this giant tension. Of course, you know the story. David says, no, I want to go. And Saul, he's looking for any out possible because he feels like every eye is on him going, hey, dude, at some point you're going to go battle this guy, right? And so David, you got to imagine, Saul, big dude, right? He's head and shoulders above everybody else. He's strong. He's capable. He looks like it from a mile away. But he just doesn't have it. He doesn't have what it takes to go to the battle. But David's like, I got it. He literally walks out into the battle, and he picks up the stones. He's like, Saul, if you don't got the stones to go to the fight, I got them. They're right here, little ones. Okay, you got it. All right, so he says to him, he goes on in this next verse, in verse 40, I think it is. Is that where we're at? 38. Sorry, I lied. Then Saul gave David his own armor and his bronze helmet and a coat of mail. And David put it on and strapped a sword over it. You know what's going on? Saul's like, man, sure, you can go. Here's my stuff. He takes the coat of mail, put it on him, puts the helmet on him, gives him the sword, or this whole thing. He's all dogged up. This kid is a kid. He probably looks like, like you wearing your granddad's suit when you were like 6, and the sleeves are hanging off of it, and there's just like this long ties down to your knees and stuff. That's what this stuff looks like. He's like overwhelmed by it, and he's like, he says to him in 39, he says, I can't go in these. He protested Saul, I can't use them. I'm not used to them. So David took them off again, and he went out into the stream, and he picks up these 5 stones. I want you to get this. This is so important that we understand. When he gets all this stuff on, he gets all the right stuff to fight the battle, right? And this is what happens a lot of times when we face a bully, a real-life bully. We tell him, you know what you need to do? You need to stand up to a bully. You need to stand up to a bully because it'll work out really well. That's what you got to do. You got to play his game. I remember one day I was walking to a friend's house, and I took the shortcut through our neighborhood. And as I rounded the corner, there was this one kid who picked on me a ton, and I saw him. And the minute I saw his face in that thing, I'm like, oh, you know that feeling? You're just like adrenaline and vomit all together. And I'm like, I knew what was going to happen. He's bigger than me. He's always, his parents don't care about him. He's that kid, you know, he does whatever he wants. And so he's way over in my neighborhood. He doesn't live anywhere near us. And he was over there, and I saw him, and I'm like, oh, shoot. And I started to turn away and get away from him, right? And he chases me down, him and this other kid, and he hits me in the head with a spade shovel, like a full-size, full-on swing hits me in the. My head's spinning. I can't see straight. I'm bleeding down the side of my face, and I am furious and had a bad concussion, so I had poor judgment. So I had poor judgment going into the game, to be totally honest with you. So I ran home, more staggered home, because I couldn't see straight. This is before we thought anything about concussions. If you knew the name of the president, you were good. So we went in the house, and I'm like, I'm going to fix this. I went in the house, and I got a knife, and I came back over, and I was ready to fight. I'm going to stand up to the bully. I'm going to play on his terms. I'm going to do this. I go back over to him. I can barely see straight. As far as I'm concerned, there's half a dozen of them. I go up to him, and he's like, oh, you're going to hit me? You're going to cut me now? And then he takes the shovel and hits me again on the side of the head. I have no idea what happens next. I'm wandering, and it's hilarious. It is funny. I'm okay. You know, it explains a little bit, to be honest, but it's okay to laugh. This is all right. I'm not like going to cry or anything. So, but I'm going to fight on his terms. And here's the thing that we got to understand is that you don't fight the bully by stooping to his level. Fight the bully by knowing who you really are. I mean, when all this stuff ended, and I went through this week just going, when did all this end? I'm looking through my life and praying through it and figuring out all these broken places and all these woundings, all this stuff that was going on. And I'm like, when did all this end? And it really ended around the beginning of 1990. But when I went to a concert with some friends, and we're going to talk about that later, and I understood that Jesus wasn't an idea. It wasn't just a theory. It wasn't a concept that's out there in the heavens somewhere, and that he loved me and cared about me one day. That he loved broken people like me, and he loved me exactly where I was. And all of a sudden, when I gave my life to Christ, not in a minute's time, it didn't go away, but it went away quickly after that, as I became more and more aware that what they thought of me didn't really matter because my identity had changed. And so the significance of what matters is knowing who you are. That's what happened with David, right? He gets out there and he knows exactly who he is. He's like, listen, you have no right to stand up against me. I stand up against you. This is what's so cool. I love this phrase. He gets out to the Philistine in this deal. He walks out to Goliath and he says to him, David replied, like, this is so funny because Goliath looks at David and goes, what, am I a dog that you come in with sticks? Are you going to beat me up? You're gonna scratch my knees? You know, you're gonna like make me go run back with my tail between. That's not how this works. We're gonna fight like men. And I love David's response after he just made fun of him. Listen to this. It says, verse 4. I have this starred in my Bible. It says this. David replied to the Philistine, you come at me with sword and spear and javelin, but I come at you in the name of the Lord of heaven's armies, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. He's talking trash to a 9-foot-tall man. This is huge. And he says, today the Lord will conquer you. It's not saying I'm going to conquer you. He says, today the Lord will conquer you, and I will cut off your head, and I will kill you and cut off your head, and I will give your dead body of your men to the birds of the and the wild animals, and the whole world will know that there's a God in Israel. And he, that's huge. Can you imagine? I mean, let's put it this way. Back to the stones. he was not holding the biggest stones, okay? Like, they're not in the satchel, let's put it that way. He's got these stones ready to bite this guy. He's gonna fight him. He knows what's going on. He knows exactly who he is. And when we recognize who we are, not in who we are because we're good looking or we're strong or we're this or we're that, but when we recognize who you are in Jesus, who you are in your identity, man, that's a powerful weapon. You have to know who you are. So if you're wanting to take a next step in your identity, that's exactly it. If you're struggling, life is bullying you, here's your next step. Your next step is to dive into and understand your identity in Jesus. It matters so much more than just some religious idea. It's so much more important than just Sunday morning. Knowing who you are in Christ gives you the ability to stand up when you're faced with an enemy that's so much bigger and stronger than you are. I got to keep going or I'm never going to end this thing. Okay, the next verse, in verse 40, this is before that thing. He comes out, he picked up the 5 sous-mones from the stream, and he put them in the shepherd's bag. Then he, armed with the shepherd's staff and sling, he started across the valley to fight the Philistine. He comes up face to face with him, holding a bunch of stones, not even remotely armed for this battle, because he knew exactly who he was, and he knew the other thing you need to know your weapon. If you're going to fight bullies, you need to know your real weapon. If you're going to fight the circumstances in life that are important to you, you're going to have to know your weapon. When I was in that same kind of vein of life, I got in a fight with a kid, wound up in a headlock for 15 minutes. Where the crap are the teachers, okay? But I'm in a lock 15 minutes, and he's pounding my face is bloodied and swollen, and my dad got called yet again to come and pick me up at school. My dad picks me up at school. My dad, you gotta imagine my dad, some of you met him, he's 6'2", at the time weighed about 285 pounds, huge, gigantic human being. I am a tiny little kid, you know. My dad picks me up. I'm already intimidated. I'm scared out of my mind. My whole upper body hurts. Takes me to the hospital. We wind up in the hospital. I wind up in a cervical collar. Tried going back to school and bullied. You just got beat up and you got to wear a collar for a couple weeks, right? I got this whole thing going on, and I'm I get in the car after we leave the hospital, and we're going, and I'm looking, where are we going? He didn't say a word. We're going the wrong direction. I'm like, we live that way. You're going closer to the city. I'm terrified. I'm hurting. We get to this flea market. I'm like, holy crap, he's going to sell me. Like, you know, and my dad, he was just so torn, like all of us are, right, dads? Like, we just get to this place where we're so like, hurting for our kids, hurting for what's going on in their life, and he's just angry, furious. He wants to tear some kids apart. We get to this flea market. We walk down this whole line, this aisle of stuff. You know, the guy who sells the cheesy rings at the flea market? Sorry if that's you. He's got this platform of stuff, and he looks around, and he's going from one. I'm like, what the crap are we doing here? And he's like, we'll take that one. And he pulls out this metal ring. I don't know if it's silver or iron. It doesn't matter to me because I barely can get it on my hand. And this ring has an eagle head that sticks up about that much. And he hands it to me. And he says, son, next time you get in a fight, if I don't see this ring all over his face, I'm going to kick, you get the idea. And so it's going to be tough. But man, I got to be honest with you. As much as I understand it, I get it, I understand where my dad was coming from, I would feel the exact same way. I just want to tear a kid apart. I mean, trust me, I have 3 girls. There's a list, okay? But I get it. But the truth is that that's not the fight I needed to fight. The fight I needed to fight wasn't swinging an arm and learning to stand up for myself. The fight I needed to fight was understanding what was not that the biggest person wasn't in front of me. The biggest person was standing behind me. That's the reason that David can walk up to this guy, this gigantic person, and talk the way he did, and talk smack. I mean, like in a big way, in a huge way. He's like, I'm gonna kill you and cut off your head. And you know that we always forget this part. He does. We stop at that thing. We stop at the slingshot, right? He goes up and literally picks up his head, cuts it off, and holds it up. This is a kid who's like, no, this is it. This is what happens to bullies, which is pretty friggin' awesome, especially if you've been bullied. But here's the deal, it is so crazy. Because he has the confidence to do this because he knows that the biggest person in this conversation is not in front of me. He's like, the biggest person's behind me. You notice what he says. He doesn't say, and then everybody in the world's going to know that I'm a better fighter than you. He doesn't play his game. He doesn't say everybody's going to know that I'm stronger than you, or that I'm better, that Israel's better than you, or that Israel's better than Palestine. He doesn't say any of that stuff. He says, listen, at the end of the day, everybody's going to know that there's a God in Israel because only God can do this stuff. And he knew exactly who he was, and he knew who was behind him. And your next step, lean on somebody bigger than you. I don't mean just finding a good friend and hanging out with them. That's valuable, don't get me wrong. But understand something. After this whole thing, I learned to defend myself. I learned to fight. I learned to argue. I got bigger. I gained some weight. All that kind of stuff came around. It doesn't matter because there's always somebody bigger. If you really want to fight and work through the circumstances that are bullying you right now, and it doesn't have to be a kid on a playground. It could be a relationship, a business deal, a struggle you've got financially. Lean on somebody bigger. Not on a person who's got a little more money than you. Lean on God. God has all of the power, and he's the biggest one in the equation. Go in with confidence that he stands behind you. Last verse. Verse 47 says this. I love it. Such a great story. And everyone assembled here will know that the Lord rescues his people. But he says, but not with sword and spear. This is the Lord's battle, and he will give you to us. Where does he get that stuff? Where does he get to know that if you're going to fight the battle, you've got to know who's in your corner? I mean, where does he get to this point where he goes, listen, you're going to know that everybody's going to know that there's a God in Israel and that he takes care and understands this. I mean, where does he get that? I look back and I think of when it all ended for me, you know. It started when I was 13. I raised hell for a living after that, trying my best to fit in anywhere I could. I rebelled in every possible imaginable way, trying to mask or Band-Aid the pain. As much as I love the Second Amendment, I'm thrilled my parents didn't have a gun at home. Multiple suicide attempts. Came home one day and so distraught, so messed up from all the stuff, I just grabbed a bottle of pills with a name I couldn't pronounce and took them, probably my mom's menopause medicine, I don't know. But all it did was make me sick. Anything I could do to fit in, to get anybody to like me. My sense of humor, I learned in a terrible place of pain. Remember the day it happened, I realized in Mr. Bleck's math class that if I could get kids to laugh at what I was doing, that I got to laugh with them instead of them laughing just at me, and I had to figure out how not to cry. It's terrible. That's where I got all the defense. And here's the worst part about it, is I'm 44 years old. Still today, guess what I've done? I've become the bully. I realize in my own brokenness and a way to heal that, instead of being a nice and kind and humble person all the time, when I feel threatened, I shut down conversations. I have a loud mouth and a big personality, and I have a tendency to speak down to people. Someone in my life about 10 years ago told me, Jeremy, you're very good with words, and your words are very sharp, and when you speak those, they hurt a lot. And I'm like, wow. I turned into the bully. I didn't mean to. It's just I did. Here's the thing, if you're in the middle of it right now, then you know what, you can apply this. Adults, you can apply this however you want to in your life. And this is very important that you do this. But if you have a junior high student or a high school student, or you are a junior high or high school student, I can't tell you how important this is right now. This is the most important thing I think you can do today, besides get to know your identity in Jesus, is develop a second circle. It was the second circle in my life that made a difference. It was the circle of friends that I had somehow maintained at church, despite being arrested and pushed away, and despite not fitting in, and all the stuff that I'd done and pushed away from, and all the times I'd gotten caught with stuff at youth group stuff. I was still allowed to come, and people still loved me and cared for me. And for some odd reason or another, God allowed that group of friends to say, hey, why don't you go to this concert with us? Our church wasn't a church that let us listen to Christian rock because it was against the rules, but we had to sneak out. Get that? Isn't that friggin' sick? We had to sneak out to go see a Christian rock concert, and we went to see DeGarmo and Keeley, and that night, everything changed for me. But it was my second circle that mattered. It was that group of friends, my youth pastor who invested in my life. It was that circle of friends who stood up for me and cared for me in my darkest hour. And you know what? I have to look up all the losers, sorry, I'm still working through it, who picked on me and bullied me. I look them up, and I do like you do. I wonder if they're successes or they're still losers, you know? I look, I'm like, oh, good, he's kind of still ugly. You know, like, but like, we go through this stuff, but you know what? Who I keep in touch with? All of that second circle. I know exactly what's going on in their lives. They matter to me because those people breathed life into me when everybody else was trying to take it. Those people represented for me everything that mattered, everybody who wanted to give me life and have it abundantly, and all of those people just wanted to steal and kill and destroy. You see what's going on, don't you? That there's a much bigger story at play here. A story isn't really about a playground. It's not really about a bus. It's not really about a shovel. It has nothing to do with a ring, or it has nothing to do with violence and being picked on. What it really is that we have a common enemy who wants to steal and kill and destroy. And we have a God who redeems all of the stealing and killing and destroying and brings people to a place where they can talk in front of hundreds of people about getting beat up by a girl and getting hit in the head with a shovel. Because he does great things. And that second circle matters much more than you think. So I just want to bring this here. If you have a junior high or high school student, or you are a junior high or high school student, this next slide could change your life. Our 412 student ministry are some of the best adult volunteers and student leaders I've ever met in my life. I did student ministry as a youth pastor for 20 years, almost 20 years. Sheila and I invested in kids, loved kids, cared about them. This is the best group of people I could imagine. I'm eternally thankful to you that you are there for my girls. That you're small group leaders who care about my girls. Because even I'm still a bully. I still bully, and even them. Like at times I look at it and I go, oh, I can't believe I treat them that way. I can't believe I said that. I can't believe I did that, or whatever. And they have somebody other than me to talk to. If they have a rough time with their friends and they don't want to talk to me, or they don't talk to Sheila about it, they have other people who care about them. Here's the deal. If you wait until your kid or wait until you need a second circle, it's awfully late to start drawing it. We can try. We'll do everything we can. So start today by all means. But the best thing you can do is invest in our kids, in our student ministry. If you've got a 6th, 7th, 8th, 10th, 12th, whatever, 6th through 12th grade student, on Wednesday nights, the doors open at 6, starts at 6:30. They have a blast. It's fun. It's all the great things. But here's what you're doing. Isn't sending them to have a good time. You're sending them to draw a second circle. So that when life gets rough, and it will, even if your kid's that athletic, big kid, even if your kid's the bully, the truth is that day is going to come when they need somebody around them. Draw that second circle now. If your kid's 2 years old and in the toddlers, don't bring them to youth group. Invest in our kids ministry. Love those people. Volunteer and get involved in it, because what we do there matters. We are saving kids, helping them take their next step out of the mess that life happens. So draw a second circle. Start this week. I can't tell you how important it is. You know what? In fact, I'd like to close by just praying specifically for them. Jesus, it's powerful to me what our youth group represents. The truth that you love us and that you give us people that will support us and circle around us. God, I just thank you for every one of our small group leaders. I know that when work ends on an average Wednesday, they don't want to get up and run over to youth group and deal with a bunch of kids and tell them to stop doing this, and they think they're not listening. And God, I just pray that you encourage them this week. Give them the stick-to-itiveness to just stay in it and draw circles for kids. God, I just thank you for Chuck and for Rachel and their leadership and their love for our kids, their integrity. I just thank you for how my girls look up to them. I just pray that you would just continue to encourage all of our student ministry team and the ministry that they do. I just pray that you would just continue to bless it. I pray that every single junior high and high school student in our church would get involved, get behind it, and see what God's doing, see what you're doing. Lord, we just give all of that to you, and thank you for their unbelievable sacrifice and their ministry that they'll probably never get to see. And we just thank you that in your name. Amen.